All right. Good afternoon and welcome to our November show and tell for SNCA. Today's topic is a pinch of history, food and cooking collections across North Carolina. And we have two great presenters with us this afternoon. And before I hand it over to them, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Patrick Cash, and I am the current president of the Society for North Carolina Archivists Executive Board. We have a few other members of our executive board here this afternoon, as well as past members of the organization. So thank you all for attending. We will see how this goes. This may be the first of a new series that we have, or this may be the first of an event that we're going to pretend didn't happen and move forward. So we will see. No pressure to our presenters, but I know they're going to do a great job. So we have two great presentations today, and before I hand it over, we will ask for all questions to be held to the end, and I will be moderating the chats. I do have some sick children with me today working from home, so if I have to step away, my colleague at ECU and colleague on the SNCA board, John Dunning, will take over and moderate the chat at the end for us. But without further ado, I want to hand it over to our first presenter today. We will move forward. Our first presenter today will be Carolyn Shankle, Special Collections Specialist at the Martha Blakeney Hodges Special Collections and University Archives in Jackson Library at UNC Greensboro. Carolyn curates the rare book and special collections at UNCG, and today she'll be joining us to talk about culinary collections at UNC Greensboro. So Carolyn, you have it, and just let me know when you need me to advance the slide.
Thank you, Patrick. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Just a little history of UNCG for those who may not be familiar. And we were a women's college prior to the fall of 1964. And while we were a women's college, we had a very strong home economics department. And so the library holdings really catered to that program. And so some of the materials that I talk about actually date back to that part of our university history. Next slide, please. So on today's menu, the three main collections I'm going to speak about is the Paul and Janice Hessling Home Economic Pamphlets Collection, the North Carolina Community Cookbook Collection, and the historical cookbooks that is in the Women's Collection. Next slide, please. So first off, the Paul and Janice Hessling Home Economic Pamphlets Collection. That one's relatively new. It grew out of a conversation that I'd had with our former Special Collections librarian, Bill Finley. We had some ephemeral materials located in the Women's Collection that were really more pamphlets that dealt with agriculture. They dealt with home management, and we needed a better way to house them. And so we came up with the Home Economic Pamphlet Collection. And that collection really sparked the interest in our rare book cataloger, Paul Hessling. And let me just tell you, he got the ball rolling and has ended up donating thousands of ephemeral items to this collection. And we were thrilled to be able to name it in his and his wife's honor. But this collection is vast. It covers, as my slide states, items as early as 1826 all the way up to our current time. It covers everything from appliance manuals, materials that came from both the federal government and our North Carolina state government as far as agricultural or home management materials. We have recipe booklets from different commercial manufacturers. Jello was a strong one. We have a lot of materials about how to can your food, and of course the Victory Gardens and the World War II food efforts. You'll find a lot of that represented. Some interesting uses of this collection. Outside of culinary uses, we do have art students coming in to look at it because they're looking at the graphic design. We also have folks reaching out to see if we happen to have the manual to their vintage appliance. So that's really kind of fun ways to use this collection. Next slide, please. So the North Carolina Community Cookbook Collection is one of our most recent collections. This collection actually grew out of a relationship we had with a researcher who was using our historical cookbook collection. And I'll talk about that later. But the researcher had made a great deal of use of those materials and just that they wanted their collection of North Carolina community cookbooks to come to us. So that got the ball rolling. And then we were fortunate to have the opportunity to share news about this new collection in the magazine Our State. And then the floodgates just opened from all ends of the state. We were able to make sure we had representation of all 100 counties in our collection. And then this also turned out to be an interest of other donors. So we have inventoried all of those donations, and by the time we get all of those materials incorporated, we'll have over 4,000 community cookbooks in this collection. And I know there's at least 3 times that still out there. It's a really rich source of historical knowledge about different civic groups, different churches, different communities. It also represents a lot of the hidden labor that women do in the home. Because now they're sharing their recipes, they're sharing their techniques, and sometimes you get a little bit of history about the person. Next slide, please. So the historical cookbooks in the women's collection, we have materials that date as early as the 17th century, and then coming up all the way till 2025. We do look for materials that reflect the foodways in the Southeast and in North Carolina. We're also looking for cookbooks that are significant in the history of the United States culinary history. So, The Joy of Cooking obviously made a big difference. Julia Child's cookbooks, those made a big difference. But these are fantastic resources. It's also a place where I can sort of fill in some gaps that may happen in the collecting areas between the Home Economic Pamphlets collection and the North Carolina Community Cookbook collection. So in historical cookbooks, we have hundreds of those. So they're a fantastic resource. Next slide, please. So today for our featured entree, one of the things that we love to do in our department is to share our resources. So, we're trying to find a way to make our collections more accessible, get the news out about them. We started a feature in our quarterly newsletter called Cooking Through the Counties with Carolyn. Nice little alliteration going on there. And so for each issue, I pick a different county in North Carolina, and I go find a cookbook, and I select a recipe from it, and then I go recreate that recipe at home. And I document my process. I document anything that happens during the process, both the good and the bad, and sort of share that out in our newsletter. So we have 100 counties. This is a quarterly newsletter. We figure we've got 25 years of material to work with. So next slide, please. So this one was fun. One of the things I like to find are recipes that use ingredients that you didn't expect. So in this particular cookbook that came out of the mountain region of North Carolina, was a little recipe for mayonnaise biscuits. Now, we think about mayonnaise. What does mayonnaise have in it? It has oil, it has eggs. So this makes sense. I mean, coming from a food science background, I see that about the type of mayonnaise. Coming from a food science background, this recipe makes sense. It's also super simple. I was making this at home. I will tell you that my husband loves to eat any kind of biscuit, but when I told him I was making this one with mayonnaise, he was kind of like, I'll have to see it when it comes out and make my decision then. So really simple recipe, 3 ingredients. Thanks to Jo Birch, I followed exactly what she said. You can see the results over there, this image. They came out just looking gorgeous and smelling wonderful. Next slide, please. And also in the newsletter, when I give my commentary about the recipes, I mean, I let you know. I let you know if it's good or not, if there's something that I might do in the future when I make it. I have not made these again. We're getting into the fall. This would be a great time to make some more biscuits. So yes, the next time I make these, I am going to turn this into a savory cheese biscuit and see if I can put in some shredded cheese and seasonings and see how that works out. If I do that, maybe I'll feature that in the newsletter just as a follow-up to this recipe. Next slide, please. If you want to know more about our collections, there's many ways you can get in touch with us if you feel inspired or intrigued by anything I've said. We would love for you to join our newsletter, find out what I'm cooking next. I haven't made that decision yet for the upcoming newsletter. I would love for you to be able to explore our collections. I do want to give a shout out to our manuscripts collections. We do have some culinary resources in our manuscripts collections. And then always email us, ask us questions, ask us how you can learn more about what we have. Next slide, please. And thank you all for tuning in today, for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to your questions at the end of these presentations. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Caroline. That was great. I know UNC Greensboro has a great collection there of cookbooks. Although I will say, I do not think you could pay me enough to try a mayonnaise biscuit. So, and
they were delicious. They were absolutely delicious. You would have been, if you had had one, you may have already had one and never known.
We're gonna pretend I didn't. So, yeah. So can't pay me enough to try mayonnaise. All right, so we're going to move on to our next presenter. Thank you, Caroline. Again, we'll have the Q&A at the end. If you have any questions or want to defend your mayonnaise preference, please put them into the chat. So let me get situated here. All right, so our next presenter, and Todd, please forgive me if I mispronounce your last name, but is Todd Kosmerick from North Carolina State University. And let me get Todd's bio up here. So for the past 20 years, Todd has been the University Archivist for NC State as a member of the Library Special Collections Research Center. His background includes collection acquisition, donor relations, archival arrangement and description, preservation, reference, grant writing, and exhibit creation. And today he's going to talk a little bit about changing food technology with us. So Todd, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Patrick. And I apologize, my camera was not working earlier, but I think it's working now. So again, I'm Todd Kosmerick. I'm the University Archivist at NC State University. And today, I'm not going to talk so much about recipes, although you will see recipes. But what I'm going to talk about is our cooperative extension materials and how they address changing food preparation and food preservation technology. I'm calling it technology, it's really just equipment in our collections. And I'll be talking a lot about the images you'll be seeing. So there's not a lot of text except at the first few slides. But the image you can sort of see here that I put in the background is a canning demonstration from the 1910s, because that was a big thing that extension was doing at that time. Next slide, please. So what is extension? If you don't know, it's a partnership between the 3 different levels of government. It's based at the land-grant universities in all 50 states, and in North Carolina, that would be NC State University and NCA&T. It's existed now for more than 100 years, and it really comes out of the progressive era ethos. It has always been an organization that does outreach to provide science-based knowledge to all North Carolinians. And that was traditionally agricultural and rural information, but it's expanded in the last 150 10 years. We have extensive documentation of extension activities in our collection, being that one component of it is considered to be part of the university. So they're part of our university archives, these collections. Next slide. The program and extension that I'm mostly going to talk about today is the home demonstration program. It's been around since 1911, so it actually predates the formal extension organization by a few years. Originally, it was set up to provide home economics information for rural women, but it has expanded since then. It is today actually not called home and demonstration anymore, but rather family and consumer sciences. But the time period that I'm going to be mostly talking about today, it was called home demonstration. So the core of this program has been to educate people about nutrition, health, food safety, food preservation, and local food systems. And they produced many cookbooks and many manuals on food preparation and food preservation. And I have found some of the things that they talk about, especially concerning the technology, concerning the equipment, to be really interesting. And so the rest of my presentation today will focus on this technology. Next slide. So the first technology I'll talk about is canning, because that was the first technology that home demonstration was really trying to train women in North Carolina about. So originally, back in 1911, home demonstration would teach girls to grow tomatoes and can those tomatoes, and then sell the cans of tomatoes to earn some money. And the girls were organized into tomato clubs, and those are now considered to be some of the early 4-H groups that were composed of girls. There were separate groups for boys. So originally, the audience for home demonstration was white girls, and then it expanded to include their mothers, because their mothers were really interested in what their daughters were doing. And then it was expanded to all white rural women. And then finally, by the end of the 1910s, we start to see programs organized for African American women. The photo that you're seeing there is a home demonstration, excuse me, a home demonstration agent who's demonstrating a pressure canner in 1924. Next slide. So these are some pages out of an early extension publication. This is dated 1917. And it's about the equipment, procedures, and recipes for canning. You'll notice one of the images shows one of the 4-H brand cans that were marketed. And there's also an image on the right that shows the hand sealer that was used to seal the cans. Next slide, please. And in the back of this same publication, there are some recipes. And I included these pages here with some recipes specific to our region of the country, Dixie relish and water rind sweet pickle. But I thought the recipes for sweet pickled peaches and yellow cucumber sweet pickle were interesting too. The yellow cucumber, I guess, was to make use of overripe cucumbers. Next slide. So found in our extension collections is this publication, which is actually not an extension publication, but I included it here because it's a publication about wood-burning stoves. And that was the way that most women who were out in the country, that's the equipment they were using. And this particular cookbook actually has a lot of pages about how to assemble your stove. So the stoves must have shipped broken down, and then people, when they were installing them in their homes, had to put them together. But in the back of this manual, if you go to the next slide, in the back of the manual, there are some recipes. And I picked the pages for pickles and preserves. And I have not done this yet, but I would be interested to compare those recipes with the ones that were in the extension manual that I previously showed. Next slide, please. Next technology that I want to talk to you about is the fireless cooker. I'm going to be honest, I had never encountered this kind of equipment before I saw it in our extension publications. So I had to do some reading to figure out how this thing actually worked. So apparently you would take a hot soapstone, place it in the cooker, and then you would, in a separate compartment, you would add partially cooked food, and then you put the lid down, and it was a tight-fitting lid, and all sides of the cooker were insulated, so it would concentrate the heat and keep it from dissipating too quickly. And so once you loaded the cooker and sealed it, then the food would continue to cook for apparently several hours afterwards. You may notice that this fireless cooker has an asbestos lining, which is a little shocking to me, but I think this dates from the early 20th century, before people really knew the problems with asbestos. I found references about fireless cookers in the extension publications going all the way up to the 1950s. So this technology was apparently used for a long time. Next slide, please. I've included here some recipes that are supposedly specifically for cooking things in the fireless cooker. The goulash recipe on the left, and then it may be hard to see, but the page on the right, a little lower than the center, there's a recipe for cooking oatmeal in a fireless cooker. The recipe on the left is from 1919, the one on the right from 1924. Next slide, please. So when rural electrification came in the 1930s, obviously things were going to change out in the countryside. I should note that rural electrification in North Carolina, but really across the entire United States, it didn't happen all at once, and it was a process that actually took a few decades before the majority of people out in the country had access to electricity. Once you did have access to electricity, not only could you power various gadgets for the farm, but in farm homes, you could now have a variety of electric kitchen appliances, some of which were illustrated in this publication. Next slide, please. And so with rural electrification, you begin to see in the post-war era, Extension was promoting model houses and model kitchens, very modern for the time, places that would have access to electricity and therefore could use electric appliances. This 1946 pamphlet, especially the page on the right, shows an electric refrigerator. And in the lower left corner, that's actually an electric stove or range there. Next slide. I just included this. This is a model kitchen from 1955, and you can see the refrigerator and the stove there too. And then it may not be as obvious, but on top of the stove is an electric coffee percolator. Next slide. In the post-war period, another appliance that farm families could have once they got electricity are large chest-sized freezers. And freezing was seen as an alternative to canning. In fact, today, if you look at some of the literature and talk to some of the nutrition experts, they actually prefer it to canning. It retains more nutrition that way for many foods. The particular publication I'm showing here, Freezing Foods for the Home, Extension actually published this in about 3 or 4 different editions from the mid-1940s to the mid-1950s. And what we see here is the 1954 edition. On the right, I included the page about freezing greens, mainly because it surprised me that if you read it carefully, they recommend freezing wild greens, including pokeweed, which, if I'm not mistaken, is considered poisonous, especially if it's not prepared correctly. But there has been a long tradition of people in many parts of the United States of eating pokeweed salads. Next slide, please. I threw this publication in from 1979 just because the whole concept of freezing a sandwich kind of messes with my head. I guess if you wrapped the sandwich up very well, it would do okay in a freezer. But you know, when you look at some of the fillings that are listed and have recipes on the rightmost page, I would just question what the consistency of some of those fillings are going to be like once they got thawed out from the freezer. Next slide. This pamphlet is from 1960, and it makes use of smaller appliances, especially the electric mixer. I can completely relate to using a mixer for bread and cake mixes, as seen in the middle page there. But I hadn't really given a thought to using a mixer for the white sauce mix that's on the right side in the middle of the page, a little above the center of the middle of the page. Next slide. This is the final publication I'm going to leave us with today. It dates from 1980, Fun with Food Equipment, and it explores a number of other small appliances that were becoming more widely available in homes. There's recipes here for crock pots and blenders. And even on the right, there's a stir-fry recipe for a wok, which I thought was kind of advanced for 1981. Next slide, please. So I want to thank you for letting me share with you some of the interesting, curious, and sometimes odd extension materials in our collections. We have more than 46,000 extension materials that have been digitized and made available on our website. And we are still digitizing more extension materials. It's an extensive archive with well over 100 linear feet worth of materials, all kinds of photos and documents and publications on all kinds of topics related to farms and home economics and you know, that kind of information. Our current digitization efforts are funded through an LSTA grant, which we are very fortunate to get. Many of our previous extension digitization projects have also been funded by LSTA. And I leave you with this photo in the background that apparently shows Moore County Extension agents displaying 6 months worth of canned fruit and vegetables that would be needed to feed a family of 5. That is what the caption for it reads. And with that, I thank you. I will put into the chat in a little bit a link to access all of our extension materials.
All right, thank you, Todd. That was great. And remember, if you have any questions for our presenters, we will take them at the end. And with that being said, we have one more presenter who will not be using the slideshow. So let me unshare my screen. And our final presenter today is Britan Sides. Britan is a graduate student at Western Carolina University, where she is studying history. She also serves as the graduate assistant with the Mountain Heritage Center, where she has done research on Appalachian food culture and the history of moonshining in early American history. And Britan is going to be sharing a scrapbook that she created during her work. So, Britan, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to share with you the scrapbook that I made for Mountain Heritage Day. At Western Carolina University, every year we host Mountain Heritage Day to celebrate Appalachian culture. And this year we did something new with stories at the table, which invited people to come and share their food, culture, recipes, memories, and we recorded those to put into our archive. And for this event, I had the idea to create a scrapbook after I did some research and found some really cool images in our special collections at the university of people farming, of people cooking. So I found a lot of interesting history of people cooking and the ways that Appalachian food culture was embedded in the lives of everyone who lived in Appalachia, and how so many different cultures came together to make this food culture. And so I created this scrapbook, Getting a Taste of Appalachia, to show all of the different ways that food played an important role in the lives of Appalachians in Western North Carolina. So, as many of you probably know, Appalachia is home to people of many different cultures. This is Cherokee land, EBCI, Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. Their reservation is about 30 minutes from the university, and there are also Scots-Irish, German, and English people that live here, and their food traditions have all culminated to make Appalachian what it is today. And so to begin with, I'm sure a lot of us enjoy cornbread. Cornbread was a popular staple in Appalachian homes, and they would make their own cornbread using a grist mill, where they would make their own cornmeal. And I used a recipe from the Jackson County Cookbook, which was a cookbook from the 70s of a bunch of people in Jackson County, locals, that came together to write their own recipe book. And I found these were my favorite pictures personally to look at. A cute little picture of a cow feeding some baby cows, which was really awesome to see. And leading into that, dairy, most Appalachians had at least one dairy farm. And they would make milk to make homemade butter, to make homemade cheeses. And that's something I personally love to read about because I love making my own homemade butter. And so I found several images of women teaching their kids how to make butter using a traditional churner, or using a traditional mold to put their homemade butter in. And another staple of Appalachian life was making these half moon pies. When I was younger, I grew up near Charlotte, and we called these something different. But it was really interesting to see them making the pies, all the hard work that goes into it, the farming, the harvesting, and then the work that actually goes into making the dough and making the jam. Was really fun to see. And here I have pictured the process of how they made these half moon pies. And this is from the Foxfire Book of Appalachian Cookery, is where I received these photos. And fruit was also another big part of Appalachian culture. There's a photo of a man picking peaches, apple trees. If you come to Appalachia, especially around Hendersonville, you will see very many apple orchards. It is a really popular thing to do in the fall to go apple picking. And so many homesteads would grow fruit trees so that they can make jams, they can make homemade wine, and all sorts of other fun things like those half moon pies. And making your own wine or cider was also another very popular activity. And I actually took this recipe and I tried to remake it myself. And I discovered that using a recipe from the 1970s to make fermented beverage was not the best idea because it instructs you to cover the fruit and sugar with just a cloth, and then you leave it out for a little over a week to ferment. That is not safe to do. And I discovered that after I did not drink it, but a few days after it was fermenting, I was talking to one of my friends about it, and they were like, "Oh, no, 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 do not do that." So that was one really fun thing I learned, is that to make sure you're double checking that these recipes are still safe and will not make you sick. But it was really fun to see all the photos of specifically women making homemade ciders and big family gatherings, using a lot of apples, making mulled cider for the holidays. Blackberry wine was also very popular in the fall as well. Having chickens was another staple in Appalachian homesteads. The photo here is a little bit difficult to see, but it's a chicken coop with a bunch of baby chicks. And so they would grow their own eggs so that they could harvest eggs every morning to have fresh. And as well as harvesting eggs, of course, you get poultry with that as well. I'm sure we all have had some good chicken and dumplings. It's a very popular staple in the South. And they're quite hard to prepare, which I did not know. I never really thought about how you get chicken to be edible, I guess. But they are pretty difficult to defeather and to skin. But many Appalachians, that was pretty common, and you would have your own flock and you would skin and cook your own chicken. This photo in the corner is of a couple men cooking chicken. These are two women surrounded by a bunch of baby chicks and some chickens. And this is a man with his prized chicken, showing him off. Another popular dish was molasses. So this is a photograph of two men making sorghum, and this is a man in a sorghum field. Sorghum was cheaper than sugar and easier to access. So they would use that to sweeten up their biscuits, their breads. They would slather it on there with some homemade butter. And this is some more about sorghum. They are taking off the leaves of the sorghum here. And this is another photo of a man making sorghum. It's pretty similar to molasses. I personally hate molasses, so I've never tried it before. But it was very popular in Appalachia. And pretty difficult to harvest and to make as well. Um, of course, we have to talk about pigs. They were another popular dish and animal to raise. Having homemade pork sausage for breakfast was another staple. And these are just some photographs. This is one of my favorite of a little girl riding a pig. Um, and a man walking down the street with his prized pig. Those are always fun to see. And you would also have smokehouses. There were different ways that people made their smokehouses. Some preferred to have slated sides with cracks to allow for ventilation, while others preferred a sealed smokehouse using mud to keep out wildlife and provide insulation. But this is where you would cook your pork, cook your meats. And this is a photograph of a traditional smokehouse. And this is, as I was talking about earlier, using a grist mill and creating crackling cornbread was very popular. Um, this is a photograph of a grist mill. And crackling is fried pork fat, and you would add it into your cornbread to have flavor. And the grist mill they would use to grind up their corn, their wheat, and their rye to make cornmeal and flours. Making homemade candy was also very popular. Here is a woman stretching out homemade taffy. I found a recipe for potato candy, which I thought was very interesting. I don't think I would ever eat potato candy, but I guess everything's worth a try. And also popcorn balls were very popular as well. Again, fruits, watermelon would cut out a hole in the watermelon, which is kind of counterintuitive because it would destroy the watermelon whether it was ripe or not. But cutting that hole into it allowed them to see if the watermelon was ripe. It's called plugging a watermelon. But once they cut that hole, the watermelon was you either ate it or you threw it out. So you kind of destroyed the watermelon in the process. Um, Poke was very popular, and they would make poke salad. They would say salad, LLET, instead of salad, SALAD. And they would mix the greens with oils or fats like bacon grease to make a wonderful salad in the springtime. And then stack cakes were also very popular. This is a woman, I believe it's a wedding cake. There wasn't a description on where she was at, but I believe she is at a wedding with her wedding cake. But stack cakes were very popular, nice tall cakes filled with jam that they would make from those fruits that they harvest and can in their canning houses. And of course, we can't talk about Appalachia without talking about canning and making homemade jam. Um, Peach butter is absolutely delicious if you've never had a chance to try that, or apple butter. It was very popular. They would also dry out apples on their porch, which is a photo of this right here. They would dry out apples and eat dried apples as well. Use those to make jams. And then they would also do a lot of pickling and preserving. They would pickle anything and everything you could possibly pickle and keep those. They would harvest them in the fall, and then it allowed them to have food throughout the winter. and they would have canning houses, which they would keep the canned food in to protect it and keep it safe. And spring houses were also essential for Appalachians. They would gather their cold spring water from a spring house, which would be located near a spring. And these are some photographs of some spring houses in Jackson County. And gathering your own nuts, hazelnuts, almonds, walnuts, those were all very popular to do. This is a very massive walnut tree with several people posed in front of it. Trout fishing or fly fishing is also very popular. People would bake their fresh caught trout in dinner jackets with stone fire cornmeal, and they would serve it with potatoes and onions. And these are some photographs of people trout fishing. And here's a photograph of some men with their catch for the day. And these are the sources that I used. I used several different cookbooks. So Fishing for Chickens, More Than Moonshine, Praise Song for the Praise Song for the Kitchen Ghosts, the Jackson County Cookbook, which is the majority of what I used for the recipes that I collected, the Foxfire Book of Appalachian Cookery, and I got all the pictures from our special collections at Western Carolina University. And I just want to thank you guys for listening and for joining me and allowing me to talk to you about this. If you're interested in, I didn't talk about moonshining too much, but that is also something else I'm researching. And if you're interested in that, the Mountain Heritage Center is doing a Pour Me Another exhibit on the history of moonshine in the Appalachians, starting at the end of January next year. So if that's something you're interested in, come visit us and check out our exhibit. And thank you again for having me.
All right, thank you, Britain. That was great. Always great to see student work and student projects. So at this time, we will open up for any questions. As I mentioned, if you have questions for any of our presenters, either feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself, or put it in the chat and we will read it out. And I will get us started while we're thinking of questions. And my question is for Caroline and Todd. The collections you mentioned at your repositories, are they used often by researchers? Are they highly requested by patrons and researchers so far?
I'll go first. Yes, they are. Over the summer, we had a researcher from California come and use our North Carolina cookbook collection extensively. Her focus was in psychology, and she was really looking at the language that was used in these cookbooks. She was looking for certain markers in the language, not so much the recipes, but just how the material was presented. So that was really fun. But sometimes we have folks come in who are trying to find their grandmother's recipes, their aunt's recipes, because maybe they submitted it to their church cookbook or their community cookbook. And that's a lot of fun too.
I will say that at NC State, our extension materials get a fair amount of use. And because we have digitized so many of them, a lot of the use is now happening online. So we don't necessarily know specifically how people are using them. I would not say in person that a lot of people are coming in to look for recipes, but they are kind of looking at food history kinds of things. So certainly they're getting pretty decent usage. Yes.
All right, thank you for that. Looks like we have one in the chat, one question in the chat for Caroline. Was there another especially interesting or unusual recipe you tried besides the biscuits?
So I do a different recipe for each newsletter. Another fun one I did, it was a cookie that called for pineapple. And I had never had a cookie that had pineapple in it. It was crushed pineapple, by the way, not pineapple slices. I was intrigued to know, what did that do for the texture of a cookie? What did that do for the taste of it? And in truth, once I made them, you don't really taste the pineapple. The cookie just ends up being a very chewy cookie. Had a really good mouthfeel. And I brought in a batch for my colleagues to try, and they disappeared. So they must be good.
Have you found a cookie that uses mayonnaise yet?
No, but again, the food science works for that because mayonnaise is egg and oil. So if you had a cookie that required that, you could substitute mayonnaise.
All right, thank you. And Britain, for you, what got you interested in food history and studying Appalachian food culture?
Yeah, so I grew up learning to cook with my grandma. And she really inspired me when I was younger to get into cooking. She was traditional Southern food all the way. And so I've always been interested in food, but when I got to the Mountain Heritage Center this fall, I got asked to help out with the Stories at the Table event, and it kind of allowed me to shoot off with this long time interest that I had. And so it's kind of always been embedded in me, this love for food, for cooking. But when I got here and they asked me to take part of this, I was like, yes, absolutely, I will 100% do this. I went down to the library. I think I got about 10 different books about the history, with recipes. I went to special collections, and just took a deep dive into that. And I started trying out recipes, and just kind of fell in love with it, while I was working on this project.
That's great and fascinating. Um, Always interesting to hear what gets students started in their research. So, all right. So, final call. Any additional questions? Please unmute yourself or type them in the chat. Going once, going twice. Playing the Jeopardy song in my head. All right. Well, I want to thank all of our presenters today. 3 great presentations, and I know we learned a lot. And it was great to have 3 such distinct collections and repositories represented. So thank you all for taking the time to present, and thank you for those who joined us today. As I mentioned, this presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to the SNCA social media and YouTube channel here in the next couple days, and an announcement will come out once that is done. Please keep an eye on the SNCA website, as well as the listserv, as the call for proposals will be coming out shortly for next year's conference. And also, we will be planning to have one additional show and tell early spring in February, with a theme/topic of love letters and love correspondence. So if you want to present about that, feel free to sign up, and that will be shared shortly. So thank you all for joining us today, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.